You're listening to the micro version of the Savage Lovecast. www.savagelovecast.com.
If you're stuck in a relationship quandary, or if you're looking for sexual harmony, well, there's nothing you can't ask on the Savage Lovecast.
When you're right, you're right. That's usually something a writer, a longtime podcaster, sometimes pundit, and all-around asshole enjoys saying. Not so much this time. Trump is polling well enough in some swing states that there's a chance he could lose the popular vote and win the White House, I wrote in September of 2016. Because of the Electoral College. Our founding slave-owning fathers saddled us with this anti-democratic Electoral College because it looked so nice up there on the mantle with that anti-democratic U.S. Senate they got us. I pointed that out in real time with Bill Maher recently, that the Electoral College was designed by and for slave owners to protect slave states, and got a lot of pushback from the bald eagles and flags and MAGA hat crowd on Twitter. But this isn't something I pulled out of my ass. Pulled a lot of things out of my ass over the years. This isn't one of them. As Sean Illing wrote on Vox on November 12th, 2016, after Trump lost the popular vote and won the White House, the Electoral College was created because in a direct election system, that would be the system that exists in all other democracies and at all other levels of our democracy, that would be the system where the person who gets the most vote wins. Anyway, in a direct election system, the South would have lost every time because a huge percentage of its population was slaves, and slaves couldn't vote. But the Electoral College allowed states to count slaves, albeit at a discount, the 3/5 clause, and that's what gave the South the inside track in presidential elections. And thus it is no surprise, Illing goes on, that 8 of the first 9 presidential races were won by a Virginian. Virginia was the most populous state at the time and had a massive slave population that boosted its electoral vote count. All right, now twice in the last 5 elections, the loser of the popular vote, the man chosen by a minority of voters, won the election thanks to the Electoral College. Al Gore beat George W. Bush by 500,000 votes in 2000. Hillary Clinton beat Donald J. Trump by 3 million votes in 2016. The country would look very different, needless to say, if Gore had been allowed to take the office he won, and if Clinton had been allowed to take the office she won. The Supreme Court, to take just one example, would have a 7-2 liberal majority if the will of the American people hadn't been thwarted by the ghosts of dead slave owners. To take another example, the bigoted views of violent white supremacist assholes all over the world wouldn't be trumpeted and amplified by the White House. As David Leonhardt wrote yesterday in the New York Times, the man with the world's largest bully pulpit keeps encouraging violence and white nationalism, and lo and behold, white nationalist violence is on the rise. That our system would, in 2016, elevate a racist, white supremacist bigot to the presidency, a man rejected by a solid majority of American voters, that isn't just a disaster for us, although it is that. It is a disaster for the whole world. My heart goes out to the people of New Zealand, and particularly the Muslim community there. The white nationalist who murdered 50 people and injured 50 more last Friday was inspired to kill by our president. We, the American people, have blood on our hands, and we need to fucking do something about it. And we can start by doing something about the Electoral fucking College. Now, amending the Constitution is hard. There have only been 27 amendments since the U.S. Constitution was adopted in 1789. But there's something we can do about it short of amending the Constitution, or instead of amending the Constitution, and that is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. The states get to decide how they award their electoral votes. Most states award all of their votes to the person who wins the state, but some dice them up, awarding them by congressional district. And there's actually nothing to stop states from awarding their votes in the Electoral College to the person who wins the popular vote nationwide. And that is what the NPVIC, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, is all about. It would guarantee the presidency to the candidate who received the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and it's already been adopted in 12 states and the District of Columbia, places with 181 electoral votes total, but the law only takes effect and only kicks in after it hits a majority of Electoral College votes. That is, after it's the law in states and commonwealths and districts and territories with 270 Electoral College votes. Now pay attention. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact has already been adopted in Maryland, New Jersey, Illinois, Hawaii, Washington, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., Vermont, California, Rhode Island, New York, Connecticut, and Colorado. That's 13 states, 3 more than the last time I wrote or talked about NPVIC, which is really heartening. NVPIC bills have already cleared the legislatures in Delaware and New Mexico, currently awaiting signatures from their governors. So, listeners in Delaware and New Mexico, call your governors and tell them to sign those national popular vote bills that are sitting on their desks. And blue states, where a majority of Americans live, are lining up behind the compact. Shockingly, though, Oregon, one of the bluest of blue states, isn't a part of the compact yet. Neither is Minnesota. So, listeners in Oregon and Minnesota, call your elected officials and tell them you want to see your state join the national popular vote movement. The Electoral College put Donald Trump in the White House in 2016. We can end the Electoral College before 2020. Go to nationalpopularvote.com for more info. All right, coming up today on the Magnum, Andrew Rannells, star of stage, screen, and film, joins us to talk about his new memoir and to take a couple of your questions. And of course, on the micro-free edition of the Savage Lovecast, tons of your Qs, lots of my A's. Thanks to Roman for supporting the Savage Lovecast. Roman is a men's health company that offers remote online diagnosis for ED and conveniently monthly delivery of medication. For a free online visit, go to getroman.com/savage. That's getroman.com/savage. This episode of the Savage Lovecast is brought to you by Mercari, the selling app that makes it super easy to sell and ship your unused things. Sell it, ship it, and get paid with Mercari. You can find Mercari on the app stores or on Mercari.com.
This episode of the Lovecast is brought to you by the good folks at Squarespace. They make it easy to build a beautiful website, blog, or online store. Head on over to squarespace.com/savage for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code SAVAGE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Hi, Dan, 28-year-old female living in the Midwest. My call is regarding a crush. I have been married for 2 years now, and I had a fling with a guy in college, which was about 6 years ago now. It lasted about 6 months. We were both in it just to have fun, but I think we both caught feelings for each other. I don't know. Anyway, I can't get over this guy. It was the best sex of my life, and I just felt this connection with him that I haven't really felt with anybody else. And yes, I'm married. I am very in love with my husband. He is the perfect partner for me. I wouldn't have done it any other way. But Dan, this guy is in my dreams. He's also on my Instagram feed and Facebook feed. So I don't know if that, if just the connectedness of society makes it harder to get over ex-lovers. I don't know, but I just think it is crazy that I still think about impressing this guy from 6 years ago, and I'm married, and like I said, I wouldn't have done anything differently. So any advice that you could give to help me just get past this, I don't know, refocus my fantasies, my attention, I don't know, Dan.
Help me, Dan. Help me. I can't get over this guy from 6 years ago that I follow on Instagram and Facebook. First things first, unfollow him on Instagram and unfollow him on Facebook. Maybe if he was a little less present in your social media feed bags, he'd be a little less present in your dreams. You are constantly refreshing whatever mental images you have of him, whatever memories you have of him with this barrage. And if he's a frequent poster on Instagram, this daily barrage of images of the road you didn't take, of the person you didn't choose, and he is now the ass that's always greener on the other side of the fence. And you just got to stop looking at him. That might help you to stop dreaming about him. It may never prevent you from thinking about him and thinking about the awesome sex that you had with him. I would encourage you to think about what made that sex so great, and if there's anything independent of him, just his body, whatever chemical thing that you two had, that you two did together, plow that shit into your sexual relationship with your husband. Now Not everybody gets everything they want in a marital partner, and there's no settling down without some settling for. And a really powerful sexual connection can make a successful short-term relationship very memorable. And there are some long-term relationships and some marriage where the sexual connection is there, but it's not as intensely felt and it's not as important over time. So there's nothing illegitimate about your marriage or your feelings with your husband just because you can look back over the course of your sex life and say, I had better sex with this person, or we had a more intense sexual connection. And sometimes it's the fleetingness of the sexual connection, and sometimes it's the very fleetingness of a sexual connection that gives it its intensity, because it ain't forever. All that said, I'm going to tell you something that I did once with and about someone that I couldn't get over. And this was pre-social media, so it wasn't that I was looking at his Instagram every day, but I was with this guy in college, Tommy. He was great. I fell hard for him. I carried that torch for years, and one day I arranged to go meet up with Tommy at Marshall Fields in Chicago and have lunch. And my intent was perhaps to run off with him, if I could convince him to leave his boyfriend for me. And about 10 minutes into the lunch, whatever it was that I felt for Tommy had clearly evaporated. Whatever the intensity of our connection was, it was tied to the people that we were years ago in college when I was a freshman and he was a senior. Something about that moment endowed that relationship. I'm laughing about using the word endowed in reference to Tommy because holy shit, was he ever endowed? But something about that moment in our lives that brought us together gave the relationship some extra oomph, an extra frisson. It was the people we were then that made that connection so intense. And when we met up later in life, the people we were at that stage didn't have that connection, and it wasn't so intensely felt, and it kind of evaporated in an instant. And I was no longer carrying a torch. I was holding on to wonderful memories, but I wasn't pining anymore for Tommy. I don't know if you should meet up with this guy. It's possible you could meet up with this guy, and it could be just as electric and just as intense, and you run off with him. But it's also possible that you experience what I experienced, and maybe you don't need to meet up with this guy to tell yourself that however you felt, however powerful those feelings were, they were about not you and him together, not you plus him equals that, but you then and him then together equaled that then. Not encouraging you to meet up with this guy because I don't want to imperil the marriage that you're in. You say that you love your husband. So maybe you can just vicariously experience that eye-opening moment that I had with Tommy where I was just like, yeah, no, not anymore. Then, yes, now, no. But again, UTMFA, unfollow the motherfucker already on Instagram and Facebook. That's the first step.
Hey, Dan. This is a 24-year-old female in a major city in the West. And I have a question in that I am not really a fan of oral, neither giving it nor receiving it. I'm mostly straight, I guess hetero-flexible, you could say. You know, I've given and received some oral, and I've never been into it. And it seems like everyone all the time just always talks about it, and it just seems like a normal, accepted thing. And I'm just wondering, is it just something I'm going to have to, get over and just accept as part of a normal sexual young adult? That people, let people do oral and perform oral on me. Don't put my mouth on any part of your body except the ones that secrete genital fluids. I'm just not into it. And I just wonder if that's something I should try and get over, or it just seems so pervasive and everyone's always talking about it, and I just am not a fan.
Yeah, people talk a lot about oral. I talk a lot about oral. Famously or infamously, I once said, oral comes standard. Any model that arrives without oral should be immediately returned to the lot. That's been thrown in my face as evidence of my misogyny or sexism, but I actually said that to a man about performing oral sex on a woman and a woman about performing oral sex on a man. So I believe it goes both ways, always, because gender is not a binary. That said, we can infer from the numbers of people who complain about partners who don't enjoy oral that there are lots of people out there like you who don't enjoy oral. Yeah, there are a lot of people out there talking all the time about how much they like oral. There are assholes like me saying oral comes standard, but there is a significant percentage of the population that just ain't into it. And that is fine. Just like there's 25, 30% of gay men aren't into anal sex at all. It's fine that you are a straight-ish girl, heteroflexible, not into oral giving or receiving. The people that get complained about are the ones who want to get without giving, usually male people want to get without giving, and rightfully their partners complain because the oral ain't being reciprocated. If you don't expect oral and you don't give oral, at least then you aren't a non-reciprocal hypocrite about it. You aren't demanding, you aren't asking, you aren't getting without giving. You're just not into it. And that's fine. The reasons you're not into it seem a little odd to me. You don't like secretions. I assume that you kiss. I assume that you open mouth kiss, which means you are swallowing over the course of your life, if we added it all up, buckets of saliva, and that's fine. But genital secretions, even if you're not into that big blown load at the end, a little bit of pre-cum, you're just not into it. Something about it squeaks you out. I would encourage you to think about what that something might be, and whether it's the zap that was put on your head about genitals, male and female genitalia being dirty and disgusting and gross, and maybe you need to sit with that and think about that. And even if you never get over it, at least own it. But you're not obligated to go down on anyone, and you're not obligated to let anybody go down on you if that's not something that you enjoy. Just use your words and tell your partners that you're not into it. And partners who are into it, if they want to form a long-term exclusive sexual relationship with you, may have to grieve it. If they have an open relationship with you, maybe they can do that oral thing with other partners and save PIV just for you. That's what some open couples do. Or you will tell someone you're not into oral, and they will look at you and say, oh my God, me either, and be so relieved that you two found each other at last. Is your home getting too cluttered, just drowning in stuff you thought you needed, stuff maybe you did need once upon a time, don't need anymore? Or are you trying to help your parents or another loved one reduce the amount of possessions that they have laying around? Let me tell you about an app that you can use to sell this stuff. It's called Mercari. Mercari is a selling app that makes it fast and easy to sell almost anything. It's really simple to use. You take a few pics of your stuff, add a description, boom, your item is listed. Then once it's sold, Mercari emails you a shipping label. You stick it on and you send it off. No meetups, no hassles. The app has over 300,000 reviews on the App Store with an average 4.8 star rating, so why not give it a try? With millions of people using the Mercari app in all 50 states, stuff is really going, stuff is really selling, and you can sell everything from fashion to electronics to toys to sporting goods. Not only can you earn a few extra bucks, but you'll clear up valuable space in your home. So don't let the stuff that's laying around that you don't use anymore go to waste. Sell it, ship it, and get paid with Mercari. You can find Mercari on the app stores or on Mercari.com. That's Mercari, Mercari.com, the selling app.
Hi, I'm 19. I'm from London, and I've been listening to your Lovecast for a few months. I really like it. I have a question regarding a relationship I've been having for around a year. So I'm 19 currently, and I started dating a guy who was at the time 27, is now 28 when I was 18. And he's only ever been the nicest guy in the world to me. You know, he's never coerced me into anything. He's been like really caring and considerate of my problems. You know, when we don't want to meet, he's fine with that. You know, we can go months without kind of talking and then pick things back up again. You know, we're both non-monogamous and we're both really cool about that. Recently, I've been feeling really weird about the relationship, and I've been thinking that it's really odd that he would want to have a relationship with me as an 18-year-old when he's almost 10 years older than me. He could date somebody his age. And I've kind of been talking to my friends about this, and everybody has kind of unanimously said, like, no matter how old they are themselves, like, oh, you shouldn't be with a guy who's so much older than you because his motives are going to be to manipulate you. And, you know, everything's been legal, everything's been consensual. He's never done anything, you know, dodgy. But I have this weird feeling that, you know, he might be, this is really weird to say, but he might be kind of attracted to, like, you know, people who are barely legal, or like that might be his thing or whatever. And I just don't really know how to deal with that, because I want our relationship to be authentic, and I don't want to lie to him about how I feel. You know, I said everything's fine, but I don't know if it really is. So what should I do about this guy? Should I ask him why he's into somebody so much younger? Should I just dump the motherfucker already? I don't know.
The question you need to ask this guy is, are you the exception or are you the rule? Are you the rare? Are you the only person who was 18 years old that he's ever dated or gone out with? Or is everyone that he dates a teenager? If you are the exception, it's less likely then that this is his MO, that he seeks out young, naive, inexperienced partners because they're more easily led, because he can manipulate them. That said, he's never done or said anything that made you feel exploited. He's never done or said anything, you say, that made you feel coerced. You've never done anything you felt uncomfortable with, and he's been a positive presence in your life, if an intermittent one. You say that you've been going out for a year. You describe it as a relationship, and you also say you sometimes will go months without so much as speaking with each other. Relationships take all different forms, and people don't have to be welded to each other's side to be in a relationship. And I believe that ongoing sexual connections, even if people don't constantly see each other hang out, are themselves, probably lowercase r relationships. All that said, I think the way to resolve your suddenly uncomfortable feelings about what this relationship is to call this guy up and have a conversation with him about what this relationship is and what his MO is. Again, if all of his partners are 17, 18, 19 years old, and he's 27, 28, 29 years old, well, then he's seeking out people in your demo for a reason. What is that reason? Perhaps he's only attracted to people who are, quote unquote, barely legal, but emphasis on legal. All right. If he's doing that, how's he treating the people that he's attracted to? Is he a good first partner for this 18-year-olds that he is getting with? Or is he a manipulative piece of shit? I don't think you can just say because he's attracted to 18-year-olds and he seeks them out that those relationships are, by definition, abusive. He could be a great first partner for an 18-year-old. Sounds like he's been a pretty good first partner for you. It's just suddenly this squickiness around age and these conversations with your friends is filling you with doubt. I don't want to give him a pass. Most people who are 28 who only fuck 18-year-olds exclusively, Fast Times at Ridgemont High-ish, are not very mature themselves. And they may be good at sex and good and decent sex partners for someone who's just emerging into who they are sexually and just beginning to explore, but they're often damaged and limited people that no one is going to be with for long. But again, it's possible that you were just the exception. And maybe I hesitate just to stamp predator on his forehead and send him on his way, because I had really great relationships when I was 17, 18, 19 years old with some guys who were in their mid-late 20s, a guy in his 30s. And they were beneficial and they were helpful. But in almost every case, I look at those guys, I remember those guys, and I was the exception. And they didn't tell me I was an exception to make me feel special, to make me feel more mature than I actually was. I met some of their exes, I met some of their concurrent partners, I met their future boyfriends, and they didn't date a whole bunch of 18-year-olds. I was just thrown in their path because I was out there doing shit in Chicago that most teenage guys in high school my age weren't out there doing, and I was meeting people who were older than I was, and most gay guys my age weren't out yet, so I was limited to older guys if I wanted to be with anyone at all, and I indeed wanted to be with someone. And luckily enough for me, the guys who were 27, 28 years old that I got with when I was a teenager were good guys, and I benefited from those relationships, and I didn't feel exploited by them, and I still don't. So when confronted with a question like yours, my impulse isn't just to do the math, isn't just to go 18 minus 28 is a problem. My impulse is to go, okay, who is this 28-year-old? Is he a good 28-year-old or a bad 28-year-old? Is it a good relationship or a bad relationship? Is it his MO? Are you the exception or are you the rule? I can't answer those questions for you. Only you can find out the answers to those questions in conversation with this particular 28-year-old. But you got to trust your gut. Let me end with this. You got to trust your gut. If you are increasingly uncomfortable in this relationship, if the age difference is beginning to bother you, irrespective of anything that he said or done, you have an absolute right to end this relationship. You can move the fuck on from this relationship. Look around. How many people do you know in their 20s or 30s who are with the people still that they were first dating when they were 17, 18 years old? Very few, if any at all. So maybe part of your discomfort here is just you're done with this relationship. And rather than just exit it, you're looking for a reason to exit. You're looking for an excuse, and you don't need a reason or an excuse. If you're done, you can just be done. Guys are terrible at taking care of their health, whether it's a knee injury, bad back, or something worse. Guys would typically rather ignore it than go see the doctor. I know I have to force Terry to see the doctor sometimes, my husbandly duty. He sometimes forces me to see the doctor, his husbandly duty. The same is true for erectile dysfunction. Studies show 70% of guys who experience ED don't get treated for it. Thankfully, Roman created an easy way to get checked out by a doctor and get treated for ED online. Roman is a one-stop shop where licensed U.S. physicians can diagnose ED and ship medication right to your door. With Roman, there are no waiting rooms, no awkward face-to-face conversations, or uncomfortable trips to the pharmacy. You can handle everything discreetly online. All you gotta do is visit getroman.com/savage, fill out a brief medical onboarding, chat with a doctor, and get genuine medication delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. Guys, go online and get checked by the doctor. Erectile dysfunction is a problem that guys don't tackle, but with Roman, it's really easy, so take care of it. For a free online visit, go to getroman.com/savage. That's getroman.com/savage for a free online visit. getroman.com/savage.
Hi, Dan. I am a 34-year-old woman living in the Pacific Northwest. I am mostly happily married for almost 9 years. I say mostly because the last year has really rocked our marriage. It's been a really difficult year. Our baby has been in and out of the hospital with severe illness, and that's obviously been very traumatic for both of us, which has made intimacy really difficult. And then the other night, he told me that he likes to wear women's clothing and that he would like to potentially wear my clothing. And I consider myself a pretty extremely open-minded, liberal person. You know, I know many people that are transgender. I have my eyes wide open and my heart is open, but this really freaked me out. And I tried to be cool. I didn't want to shame him, but it really freaked me out. And, you know, of course, I immediately think about, like, Caitlyn Jenner and Bruce Jenner secretly dressing up, and it's like, holy shit, is my husband transgender and he just can't tell me? And I had a very long conversation with him, and he insists that that's not the case, and he insists that he doesn't identify as a woman, but in fact his desire to wear women's clothing is his way of dealing with toxic masculinity and how much he has always hated the pressure from society to be this manly man that he's not, but that he still loves his male body and he still loves to have sex with me as a man, but he just likes to wear women's clothes. So I guess my question is, should I be worried about this? Is this like a slippery slope thing? I've just never heard of a man that just likes to casually wear women's clothes that is still not like cisgendered, heteronormative.
Well, it's true that a lot of trans people cross-dressed early in their lives. It's not true that all cross-dressers are trans people. Kind of reminds me of the whole bisexual confusion in a lot of the gay male community. A lot of gay guys identified as bi when they first came out, but not all guys who identify as bi are gay guys. But the fact that some gay guys do identify as bi sows a lot of confusion and leads to a lot of faulty assumptions. Same thing here. It is true of the experience of a lot of trans women that they experimented or they were expressing their true gender identity early in their lives through cross-dressing. And because they were afraid to come out as trans, may have told their partners that the cross-dressing didn't mean that they weren't men, that didn't mean that they were trans. And they had to walk that back, just like I had to walk back bi, because I identified as bi briefly and I wasn't. But it doesn't follow that there are no bi guys in the world, and it doesn't follow that there are no straight, male, relatively heteronormative cross-dressing dudes on the planet. And it's highly likely that you are married to one of them. But you have a right to your feelings. You have a right to be concerned about this new information that your husband has dumped on you and what it may portend. But it's only the passage of time that's going to reassure you that this isn't a slippery slope, that this isn't him coming out ultimately as trans. Of course, it could be that he is trans. Could be that she is trans. Only time will tell. And you're going to have to allow that to unfold over time and see where this goes. As for his explanations, his way of dealing with toxic masculinity is pressure to be a manly man. On the one hand, that sounds like somebody who's got a boner wanting to make it not about his boner. It could just be that dressing up in women's clothing turns him on. On the other hand, when you think about people who are, say, into BDSM, there's a lot of relief from societal pressures that goes on in role-playing, in erotic role-playing. The cliche example is always the, captain of industry, the CEO, the master of the universe, powerful, rich white guy who goes and sees a dominatrix to temporarily have all of his power stripped from him. Of course, he's still in the power seat. He's paying someone to enact this fantasy with him, but blah, 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 blah. He is letting go of his power because holding that power is a burden at some extent, performing that role, the powerful guy all the time. And sometimes he wants to let go of that. Maybe that's the case with your husband. He is performing masculinity. We live in a culture that looks for any fissures in a straight guy's presentation of masculinity and then points a finger and says, hey, you're not straight. I think of a tweet I recently stumbled across. Somebody named Nick Beam tweeted, so let me get this straight. A girl can strap on a plastic dick, bend you over and have anal sex with you, but it's not gay because she's a girl, LOL, LOL, LOL. And I responded, being gay is better than being straight because you can't flunk out of gay. There's a lot of pressure on straight guys. Straight guys are always at risk of flunking out of being straight. A woman can eat a pussy in college. She can have a same-sex relationship, still identify as straight. And there are a chorus of people insisting that she must be a lesbian. Me, as a gay man, I had sex with women when I was a teenager. Nobody tells me I must secretly be straight. Otherwise, I couldn't possibly have done that disgusting thing. But the straight guy who lets on that he has some interest or some experience in his history that deviates from rigid, heterosexual, masculine, performative norms will be told again and again and again that he's not a straight guy. He has flunked straight. So your husband's rationalization, his explanation, may be true, may be accurate. He may feel under tremendous pressure to perform masculinity, and every once in a while he wants to let that go and transgress against the performance of masculinity that he's required to take part in. Kind of makes a rough sort of sense in the same way the powerful CEO crawling around on his hands and knees in some dominatrix dungeon makes a rough sort of sense. So I guess it's just a long way of saying, could be telling you the truth about both these things. Just a crossdresser like so many other guys. Most guys who crossdress aren't out. Increasingly, trans women are out about being trans. You hear less and less these days about stealth. Stealth used to be this term that people deployed to mean someone who was trans who wasn't out about being trans. They were stealth. They were passing as cis. Thankfully, we live in a world now where trans women are out about being trans women. And that may contribute to the impression, because you hear trans women's narratives, that any guy who starts cross-dressing in the end is going to come out as a trans woman. But guys who cross-dress, they aren't out about cross-dressing for the most part. Guys who do this for the reasons your husband says that he's doing it, to transgress against this performance of masculinity, they're still invested in being perceived to be masculine. They're still invested in, for the most part, because they are straight masculine guys and they want to transgress against that. They're not going to be out about it, so you're not going to hear their stories. You're not going to hear their narratives unless you get online and find their porn. Unless you hang out with some guys who cross-dress or know personally some guys who cross-dress as you do. And then in time, you will see, if he doesn't transition, that it wasn't your husband starting to come out to himself and you as a trans woman. But again, it's going to take time. All that said, you don't have to let him wear your clothes. Maybe he thinks your clothes are his only option because he doesn't want to go out and buy clothes for himself. Let him dress up. If it doesn't turn you on, if it's a libido killer for you to see him, you don't have to hang out with him when he dresses up, but maybe give him permission to dress up. If it kind of turns you on, and give it a chance. See, maybe this transgression that turns him on will turn you on too. Go out and buy him some clothes of his own.
Can I ask you a kind of a personal question? How's your website looking? If you answered, Nancy, I don't have a website yet, or, well, it could maybe be better, then I have a little tip for you. Get yourself some Squarespace. Quit procrastinating and fire up your online presence already. Squarespace makes it super easy to crank out a beautiful, professional-looking website or blog or even an online store. They have templates that were created by world-class designers, so you can just drop them in and it looks great right away. And they have built-in e-commerce so you can set up an online store. There's nothing to patch or upgrade, and if you need help, they have 24/7 support. You can make it yourself and make it stand out with Squarespace. Head on over to squarespace.com/savage for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the offer code SAVAGE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/savage and use the offer code SAVAGE.
Hey, Dan. I'm from the Midwest, where I have a cousin who's also from the Midwest, and she's driving me nuts, and I don't know how to handle this family situation. Basically, she's never had sex, born again, evangelized Christian, who just went through some insane traumatic breakup with her first ever boyfriend at like 27. They almost got married. It was crazy. Anyway, she is now working for a crisis pregnancy center, which is the kind of place that's like, hey, we're going to talk over your options. You can parent, or you can give a kid up for adoption, or click this link and we'll tell you about abortion where you're going to die a fiery death in hell. Get the hell out of here. We won't support you. So I called this place, and I talked to them on the phone. I got all this info, and I confirmed that they're one of those lying, scamming, awful places. And she's now the executive director. And she's never had sex and has no idea about life. And in general, I just think these places are poison and horrible. And she's not a close cousin. And I've just been spewing stuff on social media because I'm so mad that anybody I know or even is in my life at all could possibly be involved with one of these places. Do I confront her? Do I tell her that I never want to see her again because this is the worst thing ever? And what do I do? I'm so mad. I've known about this now for a week, that she's doing this for a job. I have so many issues with it. What do I do? Do I just forget it? Get over it? I don't know. Help.
You know what offends me about crisis pregnancy centers, in addition to the way that they lie to, manipulate, and terrify and terrorize women who are seeking information about abortion or about their options, is that they're federally funded. They get millions of dollars every year in federal funding. So the lies that are told in these crisis pregnancy centers to vulnerable women, we pay for them. We underwrite them. It's not just money being skimmed out of old ladies' Social Security checks in mega churches. My taxes, your taxes, go to fund these crisis pregnancy centers. What should you do about your cousin? Well, you can't control your cousin's actions. I'm surprised you know what your cousin's up to. I have 800,000 cousins. I know what a few are doing. Few of us are in touch, but I couldn't tell you where any individual one of them works. Apparently you're closer to your cousins than I am to mine. You have an absolute right to tell her that you think what she's doing is destructive and misogynistic and damaging, and that she lies for a living. She literally bears false witness for a living. And you'd be curious to know how she squares that with her professed Christian faith, considering thou shalt not bear false witness is right up there with thou shalt not kill, and not on that list, thou shalt not abort, thou shalt not be a faggot. Not on the list. But bear false witness? On the list. And right-wing conservative Christian activists and others seem to be in the bearing false witness business when it comes to queer issues and when it comes to reproductive health. And you should say that to your cousin. You should blow the fuck up at her and then have nothing whatsoever to do with her going forward. You will have to accept that you can't control her. You blowing up at her isn't going to open her eyes. She's not going to quit her job. She's not going to write a check to Planned Parenthood. But you could tell her that you're going to donate $1 a day to Planned Parenthood for each day she works at this place going forward. That's just $365 a year to Planned Parenthood. If you can swing it, if you can afford it. And I happen to know from personal experience that telling anti-choice activists that if they do X, you will write a check to Planned Parenthood really gets under their skin. She got under yours, you get under hers. All right, the tweets. Lady Bear Jenna tweets, the fact that Dan Savage is now calling it doggedy style after that ridiculous call almost made me snort coffee through my nose this morning. Sorry about that, Lady Bear Jenna. Bill Ryder tweets, at fake Dan Savage, hashtag Savage Lovecast, to the guy who finished before she came, go down on her. Fucking is great foreplay for eating pussy. I will have to take your word for that, Bill. And finally, Dr. Jamie Bear tweets, last night I discovered that if you accidentally fall asleep while listening to the Savage Lovecast, you get really interesting dreams in which @FakeDanSavage is a really, really great kisser, but charges you $50 to fuck you. I would not. Well, maybe I would under the right circumstances. If you want me to read your tweet on a future installment of the Savage Lovecast, be sure to use the hashtag Savage Lovecast. And now some response calls.
Hey, Dan. From a monster who's crossed the line, as you said in the last episode, he does need to get therapy. There's not a lot of resources that are friendly to him to find out, and what he's going through he will not understand on his own. But I will say, I wish I'd had a friend. I wish I had someone that believed in me and wanted me to get help before it's too late. But having listened to what his friend said, there is always a fight in their head between a visceral desire for fulfillment, and people don't become molesters overnight. If you're a pedophile, it's a long road to justify it. And I'm worried because what he said his friend said sounds very, unfortunately, familiar.
Hey, Dan. So you told the guy who's unsure about whether or not that woman who came and took photographs of him in his show is interested, that he should ask a direct question and when he asks the question, tell that he's prepared to hear a no and he's going to get a direct answer. And I wish that was true, but I'm pretty sure it's usually not true even then. And it's not necessarily that women are afraid or have been socialized to defer to men or are scared or afraid of violence. It's just that being put on the spot in that moment is so awkward and so uncomfortable for so many women, especially young women. The older women get, the less that seems to be an issue. By the time they're my age, I have no problem just saying, no, not interested, thank you. But when I was in my 20s, even if someone had said to me, hey, I would really like to go out with you, is it okay if you say no, just tell me no? I could never, ever have said no. And it wasn't out of fear. It was just out of awkwardness and discomfort with being put on the spot and afraid of saying something that would be in any way unpleasant to somebody else, even with the reassurance that that would have been okay. I don't know how you solve the problem, but I just think that you have a simplistic understanding of how young women think.
Hey, Dan, just calling regarding yesterday's show. The dude was calling because he was complaining that his girlfriend wants to keep having orgasms after he does. And your answer was right on point. Like, that is not a problem, dude. That's a pretty ridiculous thing to complain about. But your advice was to hold off on his orgasm, which I guess is one solution. But another is, you know, after he comes, just keep her coming. I mean, I've had a few partners just like him who won, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sometimes I didn't want to wait that long. She didn't want me to wait that long. So I would go ahead and come and then just get down there and get her off some more. So, yeah, that's another option for him. Just get it out of his head that after he's done, the sex is done, and just keep going.
All right, before we go, Savage Love Live is coming to Vancouver, British Columbia this Saturday, March 23rd. We're going to be at the Vancouver Playhouse. Go to savagelovecast.com and click on events. Savage Love Live is also coming to Minneapolis and Chicago and a whole bunch of other cities this year. Go to savagelovecast.com/events for info and tickets. And I will see you this Saturday, Vancouver. All right, we're going to leave it there. 206-302-2064 is the number here at the Savage Lovecast. If you want to record a question or a comment for a future show, give us a buzz. 206-302-2064. Follow me on Twitter at FakeDanSavage. You can't follow Andrew Rannells on Twitter. I don't think he's on Twitter, but you can and you should order his new book, Too Much Is Not Enough. The Savage Lovecast is produced every week by Nancy Hartunian and me and the tech-savvy at-risk youth and Nancy. We'll be back at you next week with another installment of the Savage Lovecast. Thanks for downloading.